Hey everybody, and welcome back to another max velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be talking about an interesting pattern change that'll be impacting the United States next week that'll bring the threat for a ton of rainfall, more severe weather, and much colder weather to a large chunk of the United States. I'll give you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, but let's first begin with what's happening across the United States today. We'll begin with the massive trough that is still bringing some severe weather today that is actually located back up in Minnesota. Believe it or not, this has actually been bringing some snowfall behind it to areas in Minnesota, North Dakota, as well as South Dakota. But the other big concern with this is that it has been bringing a ton of rainfall and even more severe weather today, and this threat will continue through tomorrow, especially across the East Coast. But you might notice this very sharp divide on the infrared imagery, which represents the clouds and much higher cloud tops just on the leading edge of that. That's not even the cold front. The cold front is way out in front of these showers and even a few storms, but all the activity behind that cold front is all elevated, so we're not really watching for severe weather. Now, if this cold front was back behind where the showers and storms are, we could be very well talking about some significant severe weather, but luckily we're not looking at that today. Very interesting setup though overall with this low pressure system, and what's going to happen over the next several days is that this trough is going to continue to move off to the north and east, and things are going to get a bit dicey next week. And I say that because we're going to have a very interesting pattern change. Once we go through this weekend, colder weather will arrive behind this trough that's going to be centered back up into the areas like Canada as well as the northern plains. But once we go into early next week, watch closely. There's not really anything to see particularly here. The jet stream, again, not really anything to find in terms of troughs or even ridges. But what we need to do is do a little bit of I spy, because look over here on the western side of the United States. That is our next trough that we're watching early next week that will actually be positively tilted. A lot of the troughs that we've had recently are negatively tilted. This really creates a lot more severe weather. This is going to be positively tilted, which is good news because we'll not be talking about too much severe weather, but there is going to be some significant exceptions because we could see some really nasty hailstorms with the setup that we have. Once we go into Tuesday and into Wednesday, you'll notice that trough is down really far down to the south, very well positively tilted. The upper level winds will not be overly strong where the severe weather will be possible, which means long-tracked supercells are unlikely, but we will at least see some supercells capable of very large hail and as well as some damaging wind gusts. So we might see an isolated tornado threat, but I would really be more concerned in the southern plains about some large hailstorms. Once we go into Thursday into Friday, nothing really too crazy, but look by next Saturday. We're really far out from this, so things are going to change, but the European model is indicating a very nasty low pressure system over the central United States, separate from the one that we're going to be seeing early next week. So something to watch for in the long term, but for right now, I'm not too concerned about that. Another thing to keep in mind is the lower level winds. The low level jet is what helps to rotate supercells, and we're not looking at a whole lot of rotation in those supercells going into Tuesday at this time. We're really looking at a very weak low level jet, which would mean a low risk for tornadoes. So good news there, but we're really going to be watching more closely for that large hail potential. Now, over the next several days, I did mention colder weather is coming. Look back up here into the Midwest. That is where that low pressure system will be located by Saturday. We're going to have much colder air behind this. This will actually bring some late spring freezes to parts of the United States. Temperatures could dive below 32 degrees. Once we go into Sunday into Monday, that's when this cold weather really peaks. And then going into next week, things become a bit more normalized around the United States. But again, we'll have to watch next week, especially across the southern plains. That is where that next trough could cool areas down there. And if we see that low pressure system next weekend, we could be talking about another shot of cold air. And again, we're in late April, so things like this are not very common, but obviously we'll take it. If you don't want summer, colder weather is coming for some of the United States. In addition to that, there are freeze warnings in effect for those in Iowa back through northeast Kansas, and freeze watches in effect for other locations. Make sure to check out your own phone app so you're notified about your latest watches and warnings. Now, what's going to be happening over the next several days is, again, we're going to be watching for some showers and storms on the East Coast. This trough will move out by Saturday or Sunday. Eventually going into next week, we'll be watching for our next storm system to develop down into the southern plains, especially in Texas. That's where I have more concern about severe weather. Outside of there, we're watching for more rain, maybe flooding potential as well. So once we go into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, showers and storms will return. By around late Wednesday into Thursday, some more showers and storms possible. We might see some isolated severe weather. I think the severe weather threat, though, does peak on Tuesday. We actually originally did have a slight risk of severe weather back down in here in Texas yesterday. That has actually been removed from the Storm Prediction Center. I think there might be a reissuance of that at some point down the road. Once we go into Thursday and into Friday, showers and storms do clear out into the southeast, and then from there, again, things become uncertain with that possible next trough. That will be something to watch for going into next weekend. Now, let's discuss the severe weather setup in the southern plains. I already mentioned the upper level winds will not be very strong, and the low-level jet will be quite weak. So the tornado risk will be low, but the instability values will definitely be there for some severe weather. You'll notice here going into Tuesday into Wednesday, instability values do grow, especially across central Texas. This is where severe weather will likely be possible on Tuesday, with some pretty nasty hailstorms being possible. We could see hailstones upwards of even tennis ball size, but we're still a few days out, so specific details could change a little bit. Once we go into Wednesday, that is when instability will still be available, but it's going to be further down to the south. So if there's any severe weather, South Texas would be under the gun for maybe some large hail. Once we go into Thursday into Friday, a lot of that clears out, and from there, it's really just going to be a Tuesday and Wednesday threat here in the southern plains. And obviously, we are down in the southern plains, so Gulf of Mexico moisture is not an issue. Southerly winds will be able to pick up a lot of this moisture across Texas. Will have dew points into the low to mid 60s. This will be enough buoyancy for some severe weather. Again, I'm not really foreseeing a severe weather outbreak here, but we very well could see some large hail. Maybe something similar to what we saw yesterday with that severe weather event. It will probably be something along those lines, with a lower tornado risk though overall. Once we go into Friday into Saturday, still a lot of moisture there, so we might see some more severe weather, at least some showers and storms going into the following weekend. But again, I mentioned already, things are uncertain past that point. In terms of the timing, showers and storms will be possible throughout the day Tuesday, but when severe weather is possible, it will really occur during the late afternoon and evening hours on Tuesday. That is when a lot of hail could be possible with the supercells that might develop, and eventually going into Wednesday, that threat will shift off to the east, where a few more showers and storms might develop Wednesday, but the severe weather risk will go down from Tuesday into Wednesday. And one other concern with this storm will be the threat for flooding. Now, it does not seem to be significant flooding at this point, but we are watching for the threat of a lot of rainfall. Upwards of 1 to 5 inches of rain could fall across the southern plains all the way through Friday of next week. So we're gonna have to watch for that threat, especially across areas from South Texas back through Oklahoma. Though Oklahoma and Kansas are not expected to see severe weather, that doesn't mean you will not see flooding. There's a possibility for at least some isolated flash flooding. Again, this is an estimate from the European model, so things could change, but obviously a friendly reminder, make sure you turn around, don't drown if you're on the roadways and you see flooding ahead of you. Now, one thing to point out for tomorrow, there is a slight risk of severe weather across areas in the mid-Atlantic region. We have a small marginal threat southwest of DFW back through the hill country of Texas. Main threat tomorrow will be large hail and maybe some damaging winds. I'm not concerned really about a tornado risk. However, there could be a brief tornado tomorrow morning or even into the early afternoon with one of these embedded storms back over on the East Coast from Virginia back through the Carolinas, but I'm not very concerned about that threat. By tomorrow evening, all of this activity is off the East Coast there of the United States. And in addition to this, for those back down in Texas, there might be a conditional risk for a few storms to fire up tomorrow evening. Large hail is the main concern. This is kind of like a typical summertime type storm event, so nothing too concerning there. And there's also a marginal threat of severe weather in South Texas going into Sunday. But again, I'm not very concerned about this at this time. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already. This forecast is brought to you by Platinum Contracting.